What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Philly Sports Power Hour on this Victory Monday. What a game yesterday for our Philadelphia Eagles, winning in overtime over the Buffalo Bills, improving their record to 10-1. There is a lot to talk about with that game. I'm going to try to keep it positive in the beginning because we should be positive. All this team does is win. But there are certainly things that they can clean up, and we'll talk about that later on in the show. But I do want to keep it positive because what this team is able to do week after week, we have never seen before as Philadelphia Eagles fans. And they just keep winning. Just absolutely incredible. But we're going to break it all down today. I see a lot of my Power Hour crew already checking in the chat. Let's get a little bit of a roll call on this Victory Monday from the Power Hour. I see Shakur already here in the house. Neil Watson, Wine Niners Wine. Tampa Eagle. Vince Engelking, Rome. Brand Knapp, the Blonde Boy. Philly 007. It is a good morning. Sitting here at 10-1. Thunderbird checking in. M. Reyes checking in. Appreciate all you guys being here to talk about this Philadelphia Eagles team. You look at this game and you look at the final statistics. There was no way that this Philadelphia Eagles team should have walked away with a W if you just look at stats. But you can throw the stats out the window with this football team because they are just so damn resilient. And they just constantly find ways to win. I've said it before, talking about the rate at which they win football games is things you see in high school and college. Well, the way they find ways to win is just like what you see in high school and college. You ever watching a college football game and the favorite, one of the high-ranked college teams, goes down early? They find a way to come back and win. Because good teams find ways to win football games. And this Philadelphia Eagles team is a good team. And I see more people checking in, excited today on this Victory Monday. We got Eagles fan in the house. Neil Watson, the real RMP, Travis Yoder, Bridget Tobin, Twiz, Colin Ashley, Dan Kelly Green Burrito, SB Ricky, loving it, Devin Owens, Travis Yoder, Matt Lagoy, Bowner Johnson. Man, you're all here. I'm sorry if I missed anybody, but go ahead, hit that like button. Let's get right into it. I know Wine Niners Wine's going to yell at me if I don't also mention that our Philadelphia Flyers had a big bounce-back win on Saturday, shutting out the New York Islanders. Our 76ers got back in the winning column, but it's all about our Philadelphia Eagles today. All about our Philadelphia Eagles. And like I said, I want to keep it positive to start the show, as we should be with a 10-1 team and with Jalen Hurts as our franchise quarterback. But we will talk about things that need to be improved later on. But let's just take a look at this football game. And when you talk about looking at the stats and how there's no way they should have won this game, just look at the way the game went. Philadelphia Eagles were down 10 at halftime. You look at the numbers in the first half, and I'm sure you guys have seen it. Jalen Hurts, 4 of 11 for 33 yards, 2 turnovers, and a passer rating of 7. 7.0 passer rating, down by 10 going into halftime. Eagles had just committed 2 turnovers. One of them I thought was going to just be so demoralizing for that team. You have Jalen Carter, who we'll talk about later in the show, block that field goal. You get the ball back. You're holding the Buffalo Bills to 0 points there. And then you give it right back to the Bills on that really bad fumble, miscommunication between Hurts and Gainwell. They end up scoring a touchdown going into the half, 17-7. And it just didn't look like it was their night. Then they go down by 10 again going into the fourth quarter. And the Eagles bounce right back, take the lead with 11 minutes left in the fourth quarter. And then they give it up again. And you're thinking, man, maybe it's just not their night. Bills score a touchdown, take a 31-28 lead with only 1 minute, 52 seconds left in the clock. But the way Jalen Hurts had moved the ball in the second half, you just knew they were going to get into field goal range. And let's digress for a second, because I want to go back to that Kansas City game, because all you heard from the national media was about, if Valdez-Scantling catches that ball, Chiefs win the football game. Chiefs would have won that game. Well, there would have been about 1:45 left on the clock, and the Eagles would have been down 3. Well, it's exactly what you saw yesterday. 1:52 left on the clock, Eagles down 3. And what happens? Jalen Hurts brings them right down the field. You know they wanted to get closer than where they got. But then the most clutch kicker in the NFL, in Philadelphia Eagles history, and I love David Akers. This is not putting a shot against David Akers. He had a lot of success in a Philadelphia Eagles uniform. But Jake Elliott is the most clutch kicker I have ever seen, coming out at that moment to kick a 59-yard field goal in basically a swamp conditions. It was pouring down there. Anybody in the chat who was at the game, it was absolutely pouring. All reports were that rain was just nonstop. That field had to be a mess. And what does Jake Elliott do? Right down the middle, 59 yards. So clutch, man. So clutch. And we'll talk about him in a second. But the Eagles weren't done. They weren't done continuing to battle back. They go down again in overtime. So now you're down 10 at the half. You're down 10 in the fourth quarter. You're down 3 with only 1:52 left. You then go down 3 in overtime. And Jalen Hurts, our franchise quarterback, an elite quarterback. Finally, I hope that the national media, and we talked about it on the post-game show last night, Seth Joyner talked about it. I hope now, nationally, everyone starts to see that Jalen Hurts is an elite quarterback, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. He's now the favorite by far to win the MVP, as he should. Puts the team on his back, goes 9 plays, 75 yards, touchdown, Eagles win, 37-34, 10-1, and all this team does is win football games. Unbelievable, man. 8th straight win for Jalen Hurts after he was down 10 or more points. Incredible. And I see Travis Yoder in the chat saying the Bills lost the game, not the Eagles winning it. Listen, man, I said it last week when we talked about the Kansas City Chiefs, that I'm not going to sit up here and apologize for Kansas City Chiefs players not making plays. Good teams find ways to win football games. Bad teams find ways to lose them. People are talking about, oh, Bills missed 2 field goals. We blocked a field goal. The Philadelphia Eagles did what they had to do. It wasn't perfect. We will talk about it. But I am not going to sit up here and make apologies for Buffalo Bills players, for opposing players not making plays. Because good teams make plays in big moments, and that's exactly what you saw from the Philadelphia Eagles. And when you talk about resiliency, we talked about it on this show all week last week. There was every reason to believe that the Philadelphia Eagles were going to lose this football game when you looked at everything that was stacking up. It was a short week. They had just played on the road on a Monday night in Kansas City. It was an emotional win. You threw in the Thanksgiving holiday. You got all of that factoring against you. You wake up on Sunday morning and you find out the best right tackle in the NFL isn't going to play. No indication all week that Lane Johnson wasn't going to be able to play in this game. Jack Driscoll gets the call Sunday morning. Hey, guess what, bud? You're starting today. Against one of the best pass rushes in the NFL, the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo Bills were number 2 in the league coming in with 39 sacks in that game. Resiliency. Driscoll steps in. Then in the middle of that game, you're already without Milton Williams. He couldn't pass concussion protocol. Fletcher Cox goes out with a groin injury. Then you lose your starting linebacker, Zach Cunningham, who's played really well this season. He goes out with a hamstring. Bad weather, short week, injuries, doesn't matter. Horrible first half, doesn't matter. The Philadelphia Eagles find ways to win football games. And just look at Jalen Hurts, man. 4 of 11 for 33 yards, 2 turnovers, passer rating of 7 in the first half. And look what he does in the second half. 14 of 20, 167 yards, 3 touchdowns, another one on the ground, no turnovers, and a passer rating of 134.8. I have never seen anything like what we see with Jalen Hurts. You see when they show him on the sidelines, man, same emotion. No matter if they're up, if they're down, if he's playing bad, if he made a mistake, doesn't matter. The guy's going to bounce right back. And that just feeds through the entire team. And you got to give credit to not only Jalen Hurts, we talked about it before, Nick Sirianni. And we're going to talk about things that I didn't like about Nick Sirianni and the game plan. We'll get there. But when you look at how resilient this group is, a lot of it is because of Jalen Hurts. A lot of it is because of that leadership group they have on this team with Kelsey and Cox and Graham and Lane Johnson. But it all starts at the top with Nick Sirianni. And all this team does is keeps fighting and keeps finding ways to win. I've never seen a group as resilient as this Philadelphia Eagles team. Unbelievable. And Jeff Kerr put out these stats this morning talking about Jalen Hurts. When tied or trailing in the second half or overtime this year, Jalen Hurts is 50 of 74, a completion rate of 67.6%, 686 yards, 10 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and a 136.6 rating. That is insane. Insane. To take it even further, more from Jeff Kerr. When tied or trailing at any point this year, he's 152 of 214 for a 71% completion rate, 1,700 yards, 14 touchdowns, 1 interception, and a passer rating of 114.1. When this team goes down, Jalen Hurts is locked in, man. Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. And it's amazing to me that there are still people who question this guy. I've told you guys before, follow me at Legal Hands to the Face on Instagram. I post content all day about the Eagles, every day. And I did a post earlier in the week about Jalen Hurts and some of the incredible stats about Jalen Hurts. And I still have people commenting, DMing me, hating on Jalen. How you could sit here today and still not see that Jalen Hurts is one of the best players in the NFL. Unfreaking believable, man. Unbelievable. And I said it last night on the JAKIB Sports postgame show. A lot of times it gets overstated in the media. We love to throw around the word intangible. People put way too much credit sometimes on intangibles. You cannot put enough credit on the intangibles that Jalen Hurts brings to this football team. I have never seen a guy who leads a team better than Jalen Hurts leads the Philadelphia Eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles have had some good leaders. They've had some great quarterbacks through their history. I have never seen a player like Jalen Hurts and the way he is able to lead this team through adversity, no matter what odds are against them, no matter what is going on in the moment. Jalen Hurts is going to lead them to victory, and it is a beautiful, beautiful thing to watch, man. And I see all you guys in the chat loving the engagement, absolutely loving it. And I see a lot of people talking about Frank Reich. We'll get there. Big news coming out of Carolina. Frank Reich fired already. Crazy. But we will talk about that later on in the show. But let's keep talking about clutch players. So we were talking about Jalen Hurts Let's talk about Jake Elliott. I said earlier, he is the most clutch kicker I have ever seen in a Philadelphia Eagles uniform, and David Akers was pretty damn good. So that is big praise to give Jake Elliott. But just listen to some of these stats from Ruben Frank over at NBC Sports Philly. Jake Elliott becomes only the 5th kicker in NFL history with 3 career field goals of 59 or more. 5 kickers in NFL history have 3 kicks of over 59 or more. And Jake the Snake is one of them, man. Or Jake the Make, as Jason Kelsey calls him. He's 9 of 9 on game-tying or game-winning field goals. 9 for 9. And so far this season, he is 6 of 7 from 50-plus. This guy's phenomenal, man. Absolutely phenomenal. And I see some people in the chat saying Akers was better. I don't know, man. I don't know. Akers made some big kicks. But what Jake Elliott does, so clutch. Absolutely so clutch. And I want to talk about some other players that maybe went under the radar a little bit. Is we all saw the game Devontae Smith had. Big game for Devontae. This is now a few games in a row where Devontae Smith has really stepped up. It's obvious teams are trying to shut down A.J. Brown, as they should, giving him a lot of attention. But Devontae Smith comes out with a big game, 7 catches, 106, and a touchdown. But that's not the wide receiver I want to talk about. I want to talk about local guy, Olamide Zaccheaus, St. Joe's Prep product. He made maybe, I shouldn't say the play of the game because there were so many great plays in that game, especially in the second half. But Olamide Zaccheaus made a great play in the fourth quarter on that touchdown. Zaccheaus finishes the night with only 1 catch, 29 yards. But it was a big one, a 29-yard touchdown grab. Jalen Hurts escapes the pocket, rolls left, points to Olamide Zaccheaus like they're playing. You always hear people talk about schoolyard football. That's like what they were playing. Sends Zaccheaus deep, throws a pass, and Olamide Zaccheaus comes up with a big grab in the end zone for a touchdown. Eagles take a 28-24 lead. But what made that such a big catch, in my opinion, is because we all know how good A.J. Brown is. We all know how good Devontae Smith is. But we have all been so frustrated with the wide receiver 3 position. Last year, you constantly saw Quez Watkins come up small in moments like that. And Quez Watkins was activated last night. He played just as many snaps as Olamide Zaccheaus. But thank God that Nick Sirianni and Brian Johnson didn't say, hey, let's give all those reps back to Quez Watkins. Because Quez Watkins isn't making that catch. I'm sorry, man. I've seen enough of Quez Watkins over the years to see that he would not come up big in a big moment like what you saw from Olamide Zaccheaus last night. That was a huge play from a guy who hasn't had a lot of catches this season, but came up big when the Philadelphia Eagles needed him. Loved it. Loved what we saw from Olamide Zaccheaus last night. And then let's talk about Brandon Graham. What a night for Brandon Graham last night. Think about how long the Philadelphia Eagles have been around. And Brandon Graham has now played more games in a Philadelphia Eagles uniform than any player in Eagles history. And he comes up with a big sack in the fourth quarter last night. Loved to see it. But Brandon Graham is now the all-time longest Eagle. He's tied for the most seasons in Eagles history with Chuck Benderek. They didn't play as many games back then. So that's why he's got more games than Benderek. But you think about all of the players who have worn this uniform, and none of them have played more games than Brandon Graham. And I know I can't say the name Brandon Graham without instantly thinking of the strip sack in Super Bowl 52, man. Love Brandon Graham. Love Brandon Graham. And just a great night for him. Love that they were able to get the win. Love that BG was able to get the sack. But you know what's funny? We're all sitting here fired up, so excited about this win, so excited about the Philadelphia Eagles finding a way to pull it out. You realize about 10 years ago, this game would have been over on that Buffalo Bills field goal in overtime. Wasn't that long ago that overtime was sudden death. You guys remember that? It didn't matter whether you kicked a field goal or a touchdown. It was over. But in 2012, the NFL decided to change the rule that if the first opening drive in overtime was a field goal, that the other team would have a chance to come down to tie it up. Could you imagine if that game would have ended last night on that field goal and we didn't get to see that unbelievable drive by Jalen Hurts down the field to score the touchdown to win it? That was, thank God the NFL changed that rule. Now, you know, in the playoffs, even if the Bills would have scored a touchdown on that opening drive, the Eagles would have had a chance to come down and tie it. But it wasn't until 2012 that they made that change in the regular season, where a field goal cannot win it on the opening possession, because that would have just been what a horrible ending to what was an amazing, amazing football game. And I told you we're going to get into the improvements. And I know I see you guys sometimes in the chat already talking about play calling and different things like that. And we will get into what needs to be improved. But I'm trying to keep it positive in this first segment because really, guys, we need to take a moment. And I've said this before. And now we're sitting here at 10-1. I think I said this when they were 4-0. But we need to take a moment to appreciate what we are watching in front of us. I know you guys are just like me. You've watched the Philadelphia Eagles for a long time, man. When they win, you feel great. When they lose, it feels like you got punched in the stomach, man. So let's take a step back and let's enjoy what we are watching, because we may never see something like this again. What this team is doing, I've never seen it before. I'm not sure the NFL has ever seen it before. They just find ways to win games. And we talked about Jalen Hurts still not getting the respect from everyone like he should be. But there's another guy that I don't think gets the respect that he deserves. And that's Nick Sirianni. I talked about it on the show last week. I talked about how I can't believe he was number 5 in the Coach of the Year odds. Guys like Kevin O'Connell in front of him, Mike McDaniel in front of him. And you look at this team. We'll talk about it in the next segment. Wasn't that thrilled with the game plan coming out. Nick Sirianni shares in that. We'll talk about it. But when you talk about Nick Sirianni and you talk about being a good coach, I've mentioned it before on this show. I said it earlier in this show about the culture he's brought. But let's look at the penalties for a second. And I know Buffalo Bills fans and Eagles haters are talking about the refs gave the Eagles that football game. The Buffalo Bills committed 11 penalties for 80 yards. Philadelphia Eagles, 4 penalties for 30 yards. And 15 of those yards were on that ridiculous roughing the passer call in overtime on Nicholas Morrow. The Philadelphia Eagles were the more disciplined team in this football game. That is coaching. That is 100% coaching. The Buffalo Bills were undisciplined last night. 11 penalties for 80 yards is insane. And I get it. The refs missed a couple calls here or there. It happens in every game. It happens in every game. But the Philadelphia Eagles were the better coached football team last night. 4 penalties, 30 yards. And I see Hollywood Hogan in the chat saying it was roughing the passer. Look, I get it why the NFL wants to protect these quarterbacks. I've talked about it before on the show. You see how bad the NFL product is when these quarterbacks go down. There is a lack of good quarterbacks in the NFL, and that's why they're trying to keep these guys healthy at all costs. I understand it. But come on, man. Nicholas Morrow barely threw out his arm. That one I didn't like. That one I did not like. And I see EKL BW saying it was a flop. It really was a flop. Matt Lagoy saying it was a flop as well. Maybe the NFL needs to institute the new NBA flopping rule because that was ridiculous. And like I said, I completely support the NFL's desire to keep NFL quarterbacks healthy because it is a better game when these guys are healthy. I hate seeing franchise quarterbacks go down. But you know what else I hate? I can't stand now that every time a quarterback gets hit, they're looking to the ref for a penalty. Patrick Mahomes is one of the worst at it, man. Mahomes is one of the greatest quarterbacks we have ever seen. Don't ruin how good you are by constantly calling for flags, man. And you saw Josh Allen do it last night. I don't see Jalen do that. And I hope he never does. I can't stand the quarterbacks looking for the flag on questionable calls like that. Let the ref call it. Don't ask for it. It's football, man. I'm all for them protecting these quarterbacks, but stop flopping and stop looking for the flags. Can't stand it. But the Philadelphia Eagles, continuing with the good coaching before we talk about some of the improvements they need to make in the next segment. The offense, as bad as the game plan was, as bad as the play calling was in that first half, they made the appropriate adjustments in that second half. This Bills defense was a top 10 defense coming in. A very good defense. They were number 4 in the NFL. They were only giving up 17 points per game. The Philadelphia Eagles put up 30 in the second half. They put up 23 points in the fourth quarter and overtime on a team that was averaging 17 points a game coming in. Eagles put up 23 in about a 15-minute span. They made the appropriate adjustments. And we'll talk about the game plan because it left a lot to be desired. But I'll tell you this, I'd much rather have a coaching staff that can make in-game adjustments than a coaching staff that puts together a great game plan, and then once the other team adjusts, the coaching staff can't match it. But we'll talk about that bad game plan when we get back, guys. But let's enjoy this victory. Let's take this break to realize what we are watching before our eyes. But when we get back, we'll talk about some things I think they can improve. Stay tuned, guys. We'll be right back.